You know, some leaders build empires with armies and raw power. But what if you could build a society on something deeper, something more lasting? Well, today we're diving into the story of a leader whose administrative genius was built on exactly that, a foundation of timeless principles. And wow, did he create a legacy?
It's a huge question, right? Every civilization, every community has to figure this out. How do you create real social cohesion, financial integrity, and a unique identity that can actually last? It's about building a foundation that goes way beyond simple control. And this is where Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second caliph of Islam, comes in. He was staring these exact questions in the face, and his answer, it was absolutely revolutionary. He took faith, spiritual principles, and turned them into practical, just state policy. His leadership wasn't just about ruling, it was about building an Ummah, a single unified community bound by shared belief, from the ground up.
So where do you start? Well, the first pillar of his governance was social policy. But for Umar, this wasn't about control, it was all about protection. He knew that to have a strong society, you first have to have strong, compatible families. That's the core unit. And he took real steps to protect its integrity.
Now, this verse from the Quran gives us a window into the core principle he was working with. It sets up a really clear hierarchy of values for marriage. It says that a believing woman, even one with low social status, is better than a polytheist or mushrika. The message is unmistakable. Shared faith is way more important than status or just physical attraction. This was the spiritual bedrock for his social thinking.
And this is where things get really interesting. And you see the nuance in his approach. Now, the established religious law said that Muslim men could marry chaste women from the people of the book, so Jews and Christians. Omar didn't try to change that law. He couldn't. Instead, as a statesman, he issued a policy that discouraged it. This was a pragmatic decision he made for what he saw as the public good.
So why? What was he so worried about? Well, his reasoning was deeply practical. He was concerned that Muslim women would get passed over, left on the shelf, as it were. He worried about negative influences on the children from these marriages, and he wanted to guard the community's overall social and moral fabric. This was proactive leadership, trying to solve social problems before they even started. Now, this same principle of protective leadership carried right over into his economic philosophy. How should a leader look at the state treasury? For Omar, it was absolutely not his personal piggy bank. It was a sacred trust. And his approach to public money totally redefined the relationship between a ruler and the people's wealth. Just picture this for a second. Omar, the leader of this rapidly growing state, realizes his public duties are keeping him from his trade. He can't earn a living. He's facing poverty. But instead of just taking what he wants from the treasury, he goes to his community. He asks them, "What is my fair share?" I mean, that act alone tells you everything you need to know about his character.
His answer to his own question came in this powerful analogy. He said he saw himself not as the owner of the public funds, but as the guardian of an orphan's wealth. And what's a guardian's duty? It's to protect and grow that wealth, and only take the absolute bare minimum for survival, and only if there is no other choice. He drove the point home with another brilliant comparison. Imagine a group of travelers who give all their money to one guy and say, "Okay, you're in charge of spending this on us." Does that guy have any right to keep some for himself? Of course not. For Umar, leadership was a service, plain and simple, and the treasury was the people's trust fund.
Okay, so beyond social and economic policy, Umar was a master institution builder. He just understood that for a community to really thrive, it needed its own identity, its own way of marking its place in history.
And again, a major innovation starts with a really simple, practical problem. A letter arrives from a governor, and it's just dated with the month Shaban. Omar looks at it and thinks, Shaban of this year or last year? He immediately realized that to run a state effectively, they needed a standardized calendar. You have to have precision.
So what does he do? He consults the community. They kick around a few key moments. The prophet's birth or the start of his mission were options, but nobody was 100% sure on the exact years. His death? Way too sorrowful to start a calendar with. But the Hijra, the migration from persecution in Mecca to establishing a real community in Medina, that was the clear, undeniable turning point. It marked the birth of the Ummah as a real political and social entity. A community also needs symbols. Now, the title for the first caliph, Abu Bakr, was successor to the messenger of God.
Logically, Umar's title would be successor to the successor of the messenger of God, which, you have to admit, is getting a little long-winded. But a new title started to bubble up, not from some official decree, but from the people themselves.
It came from a simple encounter. Two visitors from Iraq show up and ask to see the Ameer al-Mu'minin, which means leader of the believers. When someone repeated this phrase to Umar, he recognized its simple truth. It wasn't about succeeding a single person. It was about leading a people, a community of believers. He embraced it, saying, "You are the believers, and I am your leader." And the title stuck, an identity born right from the community itself.
So, we've seen his policies on society, finance, and identity. But what was the engine driving all of this? I mean, what made him tick? While the sources are crystal clear, it all came back to his character, a character that was forged in the fire of a deep and profound faith.
This verse from the Quran really sums up his motivation. It's this core belief that sincere, righteous actions done out of faith have eternal value. They're never wasted. For a leader, this means every just decision, every single act of public service was an investment in the hereafter. This wasn't just about building a better world now. It was about an ultimate accountability to God.
And this constant awareness of that higher purpose created an incredible balance inside him. His administrative genius wasn't just raw intellect. It was a direct result of his spiritual convictions. It was the internal compass that guided every single external decision he made.
This internal balance showed up in every part of his rule. He was incredibly strong, but he was always fair. He held immense authority, but he remained merciful. He was in charge of a growing treasury, but he lived with profound humility. And all of this came from a character that saw power not as a right to be enjoyed, but as a test to be passed.
When you look at Omar's legacy, you see one powerful answer: that a leader's character rooted in sincere principles can become the actual architectural blueprint for an entire society. And it leaves us with the question to think about, one that's relevant in any era. What really is the true foundation of just and effective leadership? Is it power or is it principle?